Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
One of my closest friends is a land use attorney, and he once told me about a case that almost feels too wild to believe. It all started in this quiet coastal community, where a small HOA of about a dozen houses existed. They'd been living peacefully for years, no real drama, just your standard neighborhood disagreements, nothing that anyone would lose sleep over. A few of the houses had something special though, easement rights. These select few homes had legal permission to use a private road owned by a nearby property owner to access a secluded beach. It wasn't something the entire HOA had rights to, just those few lucky homes. They'd go down, enjoy the beach, come back, and that was that. That is, until some new development popped up right next to them. We're not talking a few more houses either. No, this was a huge development, over 100 houses built in what seemed like the blink of an eye. And the new president of that HOA, oh boy, this guy was something else. He got it into his head that the small HOA had easement rights to that same private road, even though it didn't. Maybe it was the allure of beach access for all those new homeowners, or maybe it was the power trip, but he came up with a plan. Merge the two HOAs into one big sprawling mess. And the grand prize, he thought merging them would magically give everyone beach access. There was just one problem. The road wasn't theirs to use, and the property owner who actually owned the road wasn't having any of it. You see, hundreds of new homeowners thought they could drive down this private road, park wherever they wanted, and tear up the gravel with their SUVs. Imagine a quiet road being turned into a makeshift freeway every weekend. Dirt flying, cars skidding, the sound of tires spinning. The owner tried to be patient, but patience only lasts so long when strangers are ripping apart your land. Finally, the property owner snapped. He didn't say a word, just brought in some heavy equipment and dragged massive logs across the road, blocking access for everyone. Now, these weren't just any logs. They were enormous, twisted trunks, the kind of trees you'd expect to see in a national park, not strewn across a private road. He didn't care if anyone had an easement or not. He'd had enough. The president of the newly formed, oversized HOA didn't take kindly to that. Instead of trying to work things out, he doubled down and sued the property owner, convinced he could force the guy to reopen the road. But this lawsuit wasn't coming out of his own pocket. Oh no, he made sure every homeowner in that massive development was on the hook for the legal costs. Everyone was forced to cough up assessments whether they cared about beach access or not. People were furious, but what could they do? He was the president, and he seemed untouchable. That's when my lawyer friend got involved. One of the original homeowners, someone who actually had legal easement access, decided enough was enough. They hired my friend to set things straight. And when I say set things straight, I mean he came in swinging. The first thing my friend did was craft an absolutely devastating letter to the HOA president. It was 50 pages long, meticulously detailed. This wasn't just a letter, it was more like a legal tome. Inside, he included maps, diagrams, county filings, easements, court precedents, you name it. He covered every angle. Every possible argument the HOA president could try to use was listed and demolished one by one. The message was clear. Stop what you're doing or you're going to lose, and you're going to lose badly. Here's what the letter laid out. Only a few of the original houses had easement rights. That's it. The HOA itself had no such rights, never had, and never would. Merging the two HOAs did absolutely nothing to change that fact. The new homeowners didn't magically inherit beach access. Forcing the entire HOA to fund a lawsuit over something that didn't affect everyone was not just wrong. It was illegal. The original homeowners with actual easement access shouldn't have to pay a cent for this nonsense. And here's the kicker. The manner in which the new, larger HOA was formed was shady at best. My friend made it clear that it could be dissolved by the courts if pushed. At this point, you'd think the HOA president would have backed down, right? I mean, a 50-page legal letter from a land use attorney is not something you just shrug off. But this guy, he ignored it. He didn't even try to pretend to understand it. He just tossed it aside and kept plowing forward with the lawsuit. This, of course, only made things worse. The original homeowners, including my friend's client, decided enough was enough. They filed a lawsuit of their own, this time against the HOA president personally. Not only were they seeking to dissolve the HOA, but they were also coming after him for the legal fees. It wasn't just about beach access anymore. It was about holding him accountable for dragging everyone into this mess. What's wild is that while this was all happening, The president continued to act like nothing could touch him. He kept sending out letters demanding more assessments, more money for the lawsuit, telling homeowners that they had to stay strong and fight for their rights. He really believed he was some kind of hero, standing up to the tyranny of a private road owner. Meanwhile, people were whispering at neighborhood cookouts, grumbling outside mailboxes, quietly fuming. He was single-handedly bankrupting people, dragging them into legal hell for something they didn't even care about. Then came the court date. The HOA president strutted into the courtroom, flanked by his legal team, ready to take on the world. He probably thought he was going to win, maybe even get a pat on the back from the judge for his dedication to the cause. But my lawyer friend, he was ready. He had everything prepared, every point from that 50-page letter ready to tear apart the president's case. It was over before it even started. The judge didn't just rule against the president, he obliterated him. The president lost both lawsuits. The HOA was dissolved, meaning no more assessments, no more legal costs for the homeowners. But the real twist, since the HOA was gone, the legal bills didn't just disappear. They fell squarely on the HOA president himself. He was now personally responsible for both his own legal fees and the legal fees of the original homeowners who had sued him. The fallout was swift. The man who once walked through the neighborhood like he owned it was suddenly faced with financial ruin. His house, gone. He had to sell it just to cover the debts. His reputation, shattered. The neighbors who had once tolerated him, maybe even respected him, now treated him like a pariah. They wouldn't even make eye contact with him as he packed up and moved out. And the beach, it's still there, just as it's always been. But now, only those with actual easement rights can enjoy it in peace, just like they always should have. Yeah, I don't think this story is real, or at least accurate. Dissolving an HOA wouldn't release the owners of the debt of the corporation, and placed it all on the president. There would have been at least 2 other board members involved, and owning the debt if true. The blocked road was still blocking original homes' property rights with their easement, and the logs would have had to be removed, meaning that likely there would have been some kind of settlement on the road to still open it to everyone. Otherwise, the parcel owner would have to invest in some gate access to control the easement. Just another creative writing access. Give me the case and state so we can go pull the court documents. It's public record and no one gets doxxed. One of my law professors once imparted a piece of wisdom that at the time seemed counterintuitive. After passing the bar exam and starting to practice, I would wish the exam had been more challenging. Her words, initially met with skepticism, have proven to be profoundly accurate. During my tenure in Big Law, I was immersed in highly technical litigation within federal courts. In that realm, I generally found myself practicing against skilled attorneys who not only possessed a deep understanding of the law, but also adhered to a strict code of ethical conduct. The intellectual rigor and professional courtesy that characterized these interactions set a high standard for legal practice. However, as my career evolved and I began taking on a more diverse array of cases, including those in state courts, I've encountered a stark contrast. The caliber of legal professionals I now frequently face is, to put it mildly, disappointing. Finding an attorney who meets even the baseline of competency has become a rare occurrence, let alone encountering one who could be described as good. This disparity has highlighted the inadequacies of the bar exam in preparing lawyers for the realities of practice. The exam, while comprehensive in its coverage of legal theory, fails to assess many crucial skills: ethical decision-making under pressure, practical application of legal knowledge, and the art of professional conduct. It's become clear that passing the bar is merely the first step in a long journey of continuous learning and adaptation. The challenges posed by incompetent or unethical opponents have forced me to develop new strategies and skills, far beyond what any exam could have tested. In retrospect, I now understand my professor's wisdom. A more rigorous bar exam might better prepare new lawyers for the complex and often frustrating realities of legal practice.
If you like our stories, then please like and subscribe and comment, and remember to hit that bell icon so you never miss out. We have new stories almost every day.
I never thought I'd find myself in the middle of an HOA drama while living in a KOA campground, but here I am. Let me tell you about this wild experience that still has me shaking my head. So, there I was, scraping by as a line cook in this fancy hotel kitchen. The owner of the place was a real piece of work. He owned the hotel, the KOA campground, and basically had his fingers in every pie in town. All of us kitchen staff, from the lowly dishwashers to the high and mighty chef, were crammed into this HOA like sardines in a can. And let me tell you, we were paying through the nose for the privilege. My home was this tiny one-bedroom setup that barely qualified as a room. Picture this: a sink that looked like it had seen better days in the 1970s, a TV that was probably older than me tucked away in the corner, and a mini fridge that struggled to keep a six-pack cold. The bathroom, well, let's just say it was cozy enough that you could brush your teeth while sitting on the toilet. And the bed, it was like some sort of space-consuming monster, leaving just enough room to shimmy sideways to get around. All this luxury for the bargain price of $450 a month. What a steal, right? Now, this particular night, I had been hanging out in the only town within spitting distance, about 3 miles away. It was one of those places where the tumbleweeds outnumbered the people, and the most exciting thing to do was watch paint dry at the hardware store. But hey, beggars can't be choosers, right? So there I was with my buddy, when we bumped into these two travelers. They looked like they'd been on the road for weeks, backpacks worn and faces weathered. We got to talking, and it turned out they were hitchhiking their way across the country, living on dreams and dumpster diving. Being the kind-hearted, or maybe just bored souls we were, we invited them back to our palatial HOA accommodations. We figured they could crash on our floor. It's not like we had much floor space to spare, but what the hell? Have a hot shower, maybe watch some fuzzy TV, and we could all share a drink or two. We started the trek back to the HOA, the four of us laughing and swapping stories. The night was warm, stars twinkling overhead, and for a moment everything felt right in the world. But oh boy, was I in for a rude awakening. We hadn't even made it to our little slice of trailer paradise when suddenly, out of nowhere, this golf cart comes screaming around the corner like it's the Indy 500. And who's at the wheel? None other than the HOA patrol, looking like they'd just caught us trying to steal the crown jewels. Before we could even open our mouths, they started yelling, No, they can't be here. I mean, come on, we're paying $450 a month for what's essentially a glorified shoebox, and we can't even have guests. What is this, a maximum security prison? Now, I had to work that night, the joys of being a line cook, always on call for the dinner rush. So, thinking on my feet, I handed our new friends the handle of vodka we'd been planning to share. All right, I said, pointing to a patch of woods nearby. See that dry riverbed down there? Go through those woods and hang out there. I'll come get you when I'm off work and these fun police are gone. They nodded, looking a bit bewildered, and headed off into the woods. I watched them go, feeling like I was in some bizarre summer camp movie where the counselors were fascists. I headed off to work, my mind spinning. I mean, we're in the middle of nowhere. The nearest neighbor is probably a coyote den 3 miles away. Who could possibly care about two harmless travelers crashing on our floor? Well, apparently, someone did care. A lot. While I was elbow-deep in dinner prep, stirring sauces and flipping steaks for people who probably spent more on one meal than I made in a week, all hell was breaking loose outside. During my smoke break, I stepped outside to find my buddy and our two new friends huddled around the picnic table, looking like they'd seen a ghost. And the story they told me, it was like something out of a bad TV drama. Apparently, while our hitchhiking friends were down in the riverbed, minding their own business and probably enjoying that vodka, a freaking posse showed up. And not just any posse. Oh no, this was the local HOA, decked out in their finest khakis and polo shirts, armed with clipboards and a whole lot of misplaced authority. Now let me remind you, we're in the middle of nowhere. There are no houses around for miles. The closest thing to a neighborhood is a family of squirrels living in an old oak tree. But somehow, these HOA vigilantes got wind that there were, homeless people trying to exist in the woods. My friends told me that these HOA folks came storming down to the riverbed like they were leading a crusade. They were throwing around threats like confetti at a parade, telling our hitchhiking buddies that they couldn't be there, that they were trespassing, that they were disturbing the peace. The peace of what? The rocks? The tumbleweeds? The whole situation was so absurd it would have been funny if it wasn't so terrifying. Here were these two harmless travelers whose only crime was existing in a place where some people didn't want them to exist, being harassed by a bunch of self-appointed neighborhood watchdogs. In a neighborhood that didn't even exist. My friends managed to sneak away from the HOA posse and make their way back to our campsite. They were shaken up, to say the least. I mean, they'd been hitchhiking across the country, probably seen all sorts of things, but this took the cake. We ended up letting them stay with us that night anyway. What else could we do? The bus that connects our little slice of nowhere to the rest of civilization only runs a few times a day, and there was no way in hell I was going to leave them out there with the HOA hounds on the prowl. As I lay in bed that night, squished up against the wall to make room for our guests on the floor, I couldn't help but think about how messed up the whole situation was. I've been homeless in cities all across this country, slept in parks and under bridges, but I've never felt as unsafe as I did in these so-called nice areas. It reminded me of another time, in another town where me and some friends were trying to hop a train out. We were down by the tracks, waiting for our ride, when suddenly these locals showed up. They started harassing us, following us around all night, making us feel like we were criminals just for existing. It was a long, scary night, and we were lucky to make it out of there unscathed. The next morning, as our hitchhiking friends prepared to leave, we all shared a laugh about the absurdity of it all. But underneath the laughter, there was a current of unease. It's a strange world we live in where people can be so threatened by the mere presence of those less fortunate. As I watched our new friends walk away, their backpacks a little heavier with some food we'd scraped together for them, I couldn't help but wonder about the people in that HOA posse. Did they go home feeling proud of themselves? Did they sleep well, knowing they'd chased some harmless travelers out of their non-existent neighborhood? I went back to my tiny room, got ready for another day of flipping burgers and stirring sauces, all the while paying an exorbitant rent for the privilege of living in a glorified storage unit. And as I walked to work, I couldn't help but look at the woods, the dry riverbed, the empty spaces around me, and wonder who really owns this land, and more importantly, who has the right to decide who can exist on it. The whole experience left a bitter taste in my mouth, one that even the fancy sauces I was cooking couldn't wash away. It was a stark reminder of the divide in our society, of the fear and mistrust that seems to be growing every day, and as I stood there in that hot kitchen, I couldn't help but feel that something was deeply wrong with a world where people could be so cruel to others simply for being down on their luck. But what could I do? I was just a line cook, living in a HOA, trying to scrape by. The world of HOAs and property rights and social justice was far beyond my pay grade, so I did what I always do. I put my head down, focused on my work, and tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my gut that things weren't right. And yet, as I worked through another long shift, I couldn't shake the memory of those travelers' faces, the fear, the confusion, the hurt. I couldn't forget the absurdity of an HOA posse forming in a place where there were no homes to associate. And I couldn't ignore the realization that for some people, the mere existence of those less fortunate is seen as a threat. As I left work that night, the stars twinkling overhead just like they had the night before, I found myself looking at my surroundings with new eyes. The KOA, the hotel, the vast empty spaces around us, it all seemed different now, tinged with a new understanding of the invisible lines and unspoken rules that governed this place. I made my way back to my tiny room, my home for now, and as I settled into my bed that took up most of the space, I couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow would bring. In this strange world of HOAs and KOAs, of haves and have-nots, of invisible boundaries and all too real consequences, what other surprises were waiting just around the corner? As I drifted off to sleep, the events of the past couple of days swirling in my mind, I knew one thing for certain. My view of this place and perhaps of the world at large would never be quite the same again. KOA is an HOA as I have been in a few. The only one that was chill was Southern Oregon. The other few had too many rules that don't make sense, run by Camp Karens willingly to kick you out and call the sheriff for stupid shit. Like one, the camp is a mess. We had camping gear out like chairs and cooking gear outside. Good grief. This HOA situation is ridiculous. They're literally policing empty land and harassing people who are just trying to find a place to sleep. It's not like these travelers were setting up camp in someone's backyard. They were in a freaking riverbed, and how did the HOA even know they were there? Are they running patrols in the middle of nowhere now? This is a clear abuse of power and shows how out of control some of these organizations have become. Instead of worrying about grass height and fence colors, they're now appointing themselves as the wilderness police. It's disgusting how they treat people who are already struggling. HOAs need to be reined in before they start thinking they own the whole world. Man, this story really gets my blood boiling. HOAs are the worst, but this takes it to a whole new level. These people are so bored and entitled that they're forming posses to chase homeless folks out of the woods. Are you kidding me? What gives them the right to decide who can and can't exist in nature? It's not like these travelers were hurting anyone or damaging property. They were just trying to find a safe place to sleep for the night. And let's talk about the HOA for a second. Charging $450 for a glorified closet and then not even allowing guests? That's some serious BS right there. The whole situation reeks of greed and control. The way society treats homeless people is already bad enough, but this is just cruel. These HOA jerks probably went home feeling all proud of themselves for protecting their non-existent neighborhood. It's people like this that make the world a worse place. They should be ashamed of themselves. HOAs need to be abolished or at least have their powers severely limited.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.